Hello again. Today I'm showing how to write a basic indicator for MetaTrader 5. The reason I'm doing this video is that I'm writing a lot of indicators lately and I'm explaining the same basic concepts in each one. So I thought what I would do is create this one video which is useful if you're just starting out because it shows the basic concepts of the indicator and it also explains a lot of the things that I talk about repeatedly. And then in future videos I'll be referring to this as a baseline video on writing an indicator. And then in the future I can concentrate on the aspects that are specific to those other indicators. Now I'm not just going to go through concepts, we're actually going to write an indicator, and the indicator we're writing today is this ATR channel indicator. I'll just put that on the chart here by drag that across. When you first bring an indicator on the screen, you get this screen. Common is the name and the version number and a copyright message, and you see if I hover over that copyright message there's actually a link here that will take me to the link that we specify in the code, and you'll see how all of these are set up in the code when we get into writing that code. The inputs, you'll also see how these are set up in the code, but I have moving average bars, that's an integer, I double click that, that's 10. I have a moving average method and moving average applied price because the central line on the ATR channel is just a moving average line. The method, you'll see if I double click that, it's a drop down giving me the option of all of the moving average methods, and the same for the applied price. If I double click that, it's a drop down showing me all of the prices that I could apply. ATR bars, that's just another integer, double click that. That is the number used in calculating an ATR value because the ATR channel is that central line plus a line above and below that is separated by a multiple of the ATR, and the multiple is specified by this ATR channel factor. So those are the inputs. The colors, there are three lines. There's the central line, which I'm colored green, the upper line white, and the lower line yellow. And you can see I have the style for the central line is a solid line, and the upper and lower I'm making dotted lines, and the width of the central line is 3. The others are 1. You can't specify a width greater than 1 without having a solid line. So because I want a dotted line, these have to be width 1. I'll just say OK, and there it is on screen with the default values. So you can see I have this central line, that's just a moving average, and the default for this was 10 period moving average. And then I have an upper line and a lower line that are separated by the ATR value. This looks a little better if I smooth it out. So if I go to the indicator list and the properties for the ATR, the moving average, if I make that 100, it becomes a much smoother. There. So this is the indicator that we'll be writing today. Central line, upper and lower values separated by a multiple of the ATR. Now with the MetaTrader 5 editor open, the MQL5, under indicators, I've created a folder here called Orchard. I don't like to create my indicators directly under this indicator folder. You can, but I like to separate them out here as my own indicators, and if I obtain other indicators from other third parties, I'll typically create their own folders for them as well. It just helps to keep things neat and avoids conflicts of names. If I put everything in one place, then there's always a chance that I'll have an indicator here that conflicts with a name that someone else has used. So if I keep them here under Orchard, I can avoid those conflicts. I also, because I'm writing these for videos and I may have multiple versions of indicators, I will create folders under here and a separate folder for each indicator. So for example, today we're creating the ATR channel indicator. If I have multiple versions of that, I can keep them all inside the ATR channel folder, and I don't need to worry about creating too many entries here in this one Orchard folder and just being difficult to use. So to create a new folder, just right click, select new folder, and ATR channel. And now to create the actual indicator here, we go through the wizard, we right click and say new file. It knows that we're in the indicators folder, so custom indicator is already selected. And the first screen that the wizard brings up after that is the path name, which is down to ATR channel. That's where we right click to open the wizard, and then it wants me to enter the name of the indicator. So ATR channel. The author and the link, these are the same values that we used the last time I ran the wizard. So the first time you run this, they'll probably be the meta quotes defaults, but after you update these to your own details, they will show those each time you run the wizard. I'm not going to enter any parameters here. I'm going to enter all of those in the code. So the parameters will be the inputs to the indicator. I'll just skip that. The only function I need for the ATR channel is the onCalculate. And I'm using this onCalculate that gives me all of the values I want. There is a separate onCalculate. We're not going to cover that today because I don't want to make this video too confusing and go over too many different options. There's also an onTimer and an onChart event function that I won't be using, so I'll leave those unchecked as well. The indicator may appear in the main chart window or in a separate window, the same way that an RSI or a MACD would appear. I'm putting this in the main window, so I'm leaving this unchecked, but you can also set that in code and you'll see that. And again, the plots, I'm not filling in anything here. I'm going to leave that blank. When you click Finish, the wizard has created all of this for us. So it starts with a basic comment. The copyright statement you'll see came from that wizard input screen, the link also from the screen, and the version number. And you saw the copyright in the demonstration at the beginning and the hyperlink that goes to this hyperlink, and the version number as part of the indicator name. Indicator chart window, that is the checkbox that I didn't select, so by not selecting separate window, this becomes indicator chart window. The other option, if I had selected it, would be separate window, but I don't want to use that. I'm not going to show both of these types of indicator today because again, that's too confusing to try to show both in one video. So just indicator chart window. And it's created an onInit function and an onCalculate with all of the arguments already filled in. Now, to make this easy to follow, I've written all of this code already. I'm just going to copy all of the code I've already written and paste it in here and then step through that line by line. Now I've erased the code that the wizard created, just copied my own in here. You can see I've changed the format a little. This comment block is slightly different, but I still have all the essential elements. The properties statements are still here, and there is still an onInit function and an onCalculate. So all I've really done is change the formatting. And now the indicator properties. Remember from the demonstration, this indicator has a central line and an upper and lower line. So that's 3. I've got 3 indicator buffers. So property indicator underscore buffers 3. But also I need to say how many of those are going to be displayed on screen. And I'm displaying all 3. So that's with this property indicator underscore plots. So I'm plotting 3 indicators on screen and I'm maintaining 3 buffers of values. It's the same number here. In some other indicators you may have a different number of buffers to plots. Now I went to set the properties. You saw those also where we say the line styles and the colors. And I'm setting those up here. Because I have 3 buffers, 3 plots, I have 3 sets of properties. Each of them you'll see has indicator color, label, style, type, and width, all followed by an integer. 1, 2, and 3. That's 1 for each of the buffers, or 1 for each of the plots. So I'm just saying the central line is colored green. The label, which appears in the data window, is main. The style is a solid line. The type is a line, draw underscore line. And I'm making the width 3. Normally you might only make it 1. I'm making it 3 just because it looks a little better on the video. Then the upper line, I'm coloring that white. The name in the data window will be upper. I'm making this a style dot, so it's a dotted line. It's still a line, even though it's made of dots, it's a line, it's a dotted line. That's different to saying something like draw underscore arrow, which is individual characters drawn. And the width here is 1. If I make this anything other than 1, then it will default back to a style solid. I can't have a style dot with more than a width of 1. And the lower line, number 3, all the same except color yellow and the label is lower. Now this indicator combines a moving average central line and upper and lower lines that are separated by a multiple of the ATR. So I'm going to be using 2 internal indicators to give me the value of that moving average and the size of the ATR. For the moving average, there are 3 inputs to a moving average, and so I've got 3 input statements here. Input int type, and I'm calling this INP MA bars. Typically my inputs are all INP something. Now the default value for that is 10, so input int MA bars equals 10 sets the default value. and then this comment at the end of the input line appears as the prompt for that input on screen. Without that comment, the default prompt will just be the name of this variable, which is not very user-friendly. So I always include a comment like this at the end of each input line. Now the next line, input enum ma method, input ma method equals mode underscore SMA. Mode underscore SMA is one of the values of this enum. By declaring this as a type enum, I get that drop-down box that you saw on the input screen. And the drop-down only shows values that are valid for this enum. And then I do the same for the next input, but this is enum applied price, and I'm calling this input ma applied price, and the default for that is price underscore close, closing price. So these three plus the symbol and time frame are all of the inputs needed for a moving average calculation. Apart from symbol and time frame, there's only one input that's needed for ATR, and that's input int ATR bars, and I've set the default for that to 10. And then I have one more input. This is not part of the calculation of ATR, this is the factor. So once I've calculated an ATR, I'm going to separate those upper and lower lines by this multiple of the ATR. So that's used only inside this indicator, it's not used to calculate the ATR. But this is a double. By having this as an input double, I can enter fractions. You can see here I've got 3.0 as the default. If I had made this an int, the same as this, then you could only enter integer values in the inputs. Now I said at the beginning that I have 3 buffers, Indocator Buffers 3. I need an array of doubles to match each of these buffers. And that array of doubles will actually hold the values that are going to be displayed on screen. So here they are, declaring them as double, buffer main, and this is a dynamic array. It'll be automatically resized by the indicator to match the total number of bars that I have for this symbol. So I have buffer main is the central line, buffer upper is going to be the upper line, and buffer lower will be the lower line. And now for the 2 internal indicators that I'm going to use, the moving average and the ATR, I'll need to set up handles to each of those indicators. So I just have integer variables, handle MA and handle ATR. And I'm also going to retrieve values from each of those indicators as an array. So I've declared also double arrays here, values MA and values ATR. And now that I've declared these buffer main, upper and lower as arrays to hold the indicator data, I need to associate those with the buffer numbers. So just creating the arrays isn't enough. I actually need to indicate which of these is which buffer. Now, although at the beginning here I have 3 buffers and I began numbering these properties from 1, 2 and 3, the buffers are actually 0 based. So buffer main is going to be buffer number 0, upper is going to be 1 and lower is going to be 2. And I set up that association with these set index buffer statements. Set index buffer, baseline, buffer main. Now baseline, upper band and lower band are constants built into MetaTrader 5. So rather than use 0, 1 and 2, I'm actually using these constants because then if I refer to them in the code, I have something that makes a little more sense by reading the name rather than a number. I actually don't refer to them further in the code, but in more complex indicators you might. So I'm associating buffer main with buffer 0, buffer upper with number 1, and buffer lower with number 2. The next here, array set as series. Typically, if I just use these arrays, then element number 0 will correspond to the bar number that's on the far left of my range of bars. It'd be well off the screen. I want element number 0 of this buffer to correspond to bar number 0, which is the current bar on the screen. So by using array set as series, passing in the buffer and true, I'm actually saying I'm going to be referring to this as a series array, and in that case element number 0, when I call buffer main 0, will actually be the same as bar number 0 on the screen. So I do that for buffer main, upper and lower. Now I set up the handles to the moving average and the ATR indicators that I'm going to be using. So the IMA function for the moving average takes the symbol bracket bracket is the current chart symbol, the time frame, and period bracket bracket is the current chart period, the inputs, the number of moving average bars. There's a shift argument here that I never use, so I just set that to 0. The moving average method and the moving average applied price. And so this call returns a handle which I assign to that handle MA, and I can use the handle MA later to get values for the moving average indicator. For the ATR, the arguments to that are the chart symbol, the chart period, and the ATR bars. And that also returns a handle for the ATR. Now I also said that I have these arrays, values MA and values ATR, that I'll be using to retrieve values from these handles. And just as for the buffers, I want these to be in the same order as the bars on screen. So again, array set as series true for each of these two. Now if these MA or ATR function calls fail for some reason, then handle MA or handle ATR will be an invalid handle. And there's no point in going any further because I won't be able to perform any calculations. So I have this one test. If handle MA is equal to invalid handle, or double vertical line, handle ATR is equal to invalid handle, then it means I've got a problem. So I'm just going to print a message, failed to create indicator handles, and return init failed, and that will stop the indicator from running. But if this is successful, I'll just come through to this line where I'll return init succeeded. Now because I've created these two indicator handles, to free up system resources, I need to release those when this indicator is removed from the chart. So in the onDinit function, which is called when the indicator is removed, I call indicator release for the handle MA and the handle ATR. And now the onCalculate function. This is called repeatedly whenever something happens that may mean the indicator needs to be recalculated. So every minor price movement will trigger this. And it has a series of inputs. Rates total will be the total number of rates or total number of bars that I have available in this symbol and that time frame. So it's the number of bars in total. Prev calculated is actually the value that was returned from this function the last time it was called. So you'll see the onCalculate is a type int. The integer that's returned at the end of onCalculate gets passed back in here as prev calculated. And what you would typically do is return rates total at the end, and that way you can compare prev calculated and rates total the next time this is called and know how many bars need to be calculated. So you don't need to recalculate everything every time. And as it says here, this is returned from the last call. The rest of these, time, open, high, low, close, tick volume, volume, and spread, they are arrays of the appropriate values, the opening time, the opening price, high price, low price, close price, tick volume, and so on for each bar on screen. So these arrays are actually the same size as the number of rates total. And you can use these to readily get values from any bar on the screen. And now I mentioned that prev calculated and rates total are combined to tell me how many bars I need to calculate for. So the first time this onCalculate is called, prev calculated is 0. But after that, it's going to have the number that I returned last time. So I want to know how many bars I'm going to actually perform the calculation for, and I do that with this int count equals rates total minus prev calculated. So that way I'm only going to perform the loop for as many bars as have not already been calculated. But I also want to always recalculate bar number 0 because the price may have changed and I might need to recalculate the value there. And just in case a new bar has created, I also want to recalculate bar number 1 because the prices that I used when I recalculated that last time when it was still bar number 0 may have changed when it moved to bar number 1. So I handle that with this if prev calculated is greater than 0, which means that I've been through this loop at least once, then count plus plus. I'm just adding 1, forcing it to always do either bar number 0 or bar 1 and 0. Now I want to get the values from that moving average and ATR that I set up. I'm using that copy buffer statement. So copy buffer will get the values from these indicator handles and put them into an array. And the arguments to copy buffer are the handle, so handle MA, the buffer number from that indicator. So the moving average and ATR both have one buffer each. So that's buffer number 0. That's why I'm passing a 0 in both of these. The element number where I want to begin, and I'm beginning from bar number 0 on each one. The number of values that I want to get, I'm getting count. So count is the number I'm going to be using. I might as well get that many back. And I'm storing those in values MA or values ATR. So these are the two arrays that I defined to hold those values. So at the end of these two statements, I will have values MA and values ATR populated with all of the moving averages and the ATR values for this number count. Now I could add to this an extra statement because copy buffer returns an integer, which is the number of values that were actually loaded into these arrays. So I can modify this and I can say if copy buffer is less than count, which means I didn't get as many values as I wanted to, then I just return 0. That will take me out of this on calculate loop, and the next time I come in here, prev calculated will be 0 again, which will force me to recalculate everything. And so I can do that for both of those statements, and that just makes sure that if anything went wrong in here, the next time I come into this function, I'm just going to recalculate everything there, and that will clean it all up. So remember, this return 0, next time that will come into prev calculated. And once I'm through that, I'm into this loop. I'm going to loop through every element that I have, or for the number of count, and I'm going to count down from count minus 1 while I is greater than or equal to 0, using I minus minus to count down. I'm going from count minus 1 because although count is the number of bars that I want to calculate, count minus 1 is the bar number of the highest bar that I need to calculate. So I'm going from count minus 1 all the way down to 0. The central buffer, buffer main, I just assign the value buffer main I equals, and I'm just getting that from values MA I. And it's as simple as that to set this value, and by simply assigning a value into that array, that becomes the position where it plots on the screen. Now I need the channel width, and that is just the same value as ATR I, so that gets me the appropriate ATR value, and I multiply that by the input ATR factor, and that gives me the width of the channel above and below this central line. And then the upper line, I, is just the middle line, buffer main I plus the channel width, and the lower line is just buffer main minus the channel width. And at the end of that, I return rates total, so that can come back in prev calculated next time, and I only have to recalculate either bars 1 and 0 or as many new bars as have formed. And that's a complete ATR channel indicator covering most of the main concepts that you will see in a basic indicator. Now there are of course a lot of variations with different types of indicators, and I'll be covering those in later videos, but I didn't want to complicate this video by showing a lot of things that are not relevant right now. So this is actually the beginning of a series of videos where I'll add on to this as needed to show how to write basic indicators. Let me just compile that to make sure I haven't got an error. I didn't think I would because I've copied all this code in from somewhere else. And then this matches the demonstration we had at the beginning of the video. So you now have the ATR channel indicator and an explanation of how this works so that I can refer to this in future videos where I'm talking about other types of indicators. Hope you found it useful. If you did, click the like button, click subscribe, click the bell icon for notifications, and until next time, thank you for watching.